would you take the 2022 Electoral Reform Act as part of that?
Yes, the issue of electoral reforms has been an ongoing process. Nigeria has been struggling to enthrone a kind of election that will bring forth candidates that is truly a representation of the yearnings and aspirations of the people. You know, the cornerstone of every democracy and the primary tool for enthroning the democratic principle of citizen sovereignty is a free, fair, and credible election. That is to say, the election is the only opportunity that the people have to elect leaders, to select leaders that will lead the country towards the path of development. And the trying to get the electoral process seamless and effective has been a major challenge since the return of independence in 1960. There have been several reforms on different levels. Even the name INEC, this electoral management body INEC, had been named and renamed over 6 times. It used to be electoral management effect. Later it became NADECO. NADECO became NECON. From there it became INEC. There have been a struggle. Change of name had not really materialized. What we saw in 2022 was that for the first time, Nigeria now went deeper into trying to create an holistic framework that will solve some of the issues that had bedeviled the Nigerian democracy. All thanks to President Muhammadu Buhari, who enacted that law. And we had the electoral reforms, where before now, they used to say number of overvoting was dependent on the total numbers of registered voters. Then I said, no, it's going to be determined by beavers. There was now infusion of card reader. Later, they metamorphosed into the beavers. There was now issue of transmission of results. They now spoke about the issue of debt because we've seen issues of assassination of candidates that were running for election. And I said, no, if candidates are now being assassinated, we're not going to give it to the second man on ground, the second runner-up. We're going to conduct fresh elections. So all of those things were tried to sanitize. They even extended the period for campaigns, extended the period of primaries. All of those things were the reforms we had in that 2022. And Nigerians were hopeful that we're going to get an election that to a large extent was a jump from what we used to have. Like, even though we were failing, let us start failing forward. What we saw in 2023 was that there was after the election, there was now a big lacuna. We now saw that even some of the laws that we had enacted, they were opposed everywhere. That the Nigerian people cannot go to court to challenge the elections. There were so many things that rose up. First of all, the issue of overvoting was now be brought to bear. We now saw that now that overvoting, to prove overvoting is no longer by the number of people on the register, we now discover that the materials needed are now so enormous. You now have to prevent your beavers, you now have to prevent your voter register, you now have to prevent it from ECAT. And many of these documents and materials are not easily accessible from INEC. If whether it's accessible for governorship, and you pay humongously, also you could have to pay hundreds of millions to INEC to get certificatory copies of results and to get the beavers. It is usually expensive. And the burden of proof is no longer just on being on just perhaps on the litigants say, oh, they stole my mandate. INEC does not hold any responsibility in the process of electoral jurisprudence to say this was the result we called, this was the mistake. INEC remains totally silent and irresponsible when you take them to court. Beyond that aspect of difficulty in proving overvoting, despite the fact the materials are there, you see obviously that the numbers are over on the ballot. You see that the numbers on the beavers is clearly shows overvoting. But to prove it in court becomes a burden. You leave that one, you go to the next issue, the issue of IREV. INEC, the other issue is very tactical because statutorily, the Electoral Act gives INEC the power to make laws, guidelines, and manners on how the election will be conducted. But when INEC brings out its manual, for election, that INEC manual is not admissible in court. That is to say, if INEC brings out its manual to say, oh, we're going to transmit results through electronically, we're going to do A, B, C, and D, and it gives it to political party. Political party are honor bound and duty bound to obey. If not, they may be disqualified. But having obeyed, if you now go to court, anybody that has disobeyed and now secures victory through the back door, when you go to court, INEC, where the law court, the Supreme Court will say that that document that was given by INEC is not admissible. That means they can't judge on that document. They will now quickly go and revert back to the Electoral Act, which is not all encompassing of all the relevant sections needed to guide the electoral process. That is also fraud on the part of the judiciary. It's the height of irresponsibility that Nigerian government, through the law, will give power to INEC to make law. INEC makes law on the conduct and process of election. Then the court will come back to tell you that that law is not admissible. So when Nigerians were happy, we were celebrating that yes, for the first time in a long while, there will be electoral of results. The court told us that IREV is not a collation center and INEC is not part of the collation center. That was a major lacuna, a major drawback in that former electoral act. What we thought to have achieved, the Nigerian judiciary threw it into the dustbin and trashed it. Beyond that, we have the issue of that INEC guidelines. How can INEC make law and the law is not substantive? the law is not admissible. And when you take INEC to court, INEC does not say anything, INEC does not do anything, INEC remains mute and irresponsible. How can Nigeria give its electoral college to a body who cannot come to court to say, no, this is what we did, we present this result, and this is what shows? Because even when they give you a certificate copy, when you add the unit result, it does not correlate with the word. They will tell you that is why you should go to court. When you go to court, it becomes another bug. INEC does not even come out to say there was a mistake or there was no mistake. Okay. INEC does not provide witness, INEC does not provide proof, INEC does not provide material. So that's why we are also saying that going forward, the proof of burden should not just be on the man whose money was stolen. It should also be on INEC.